Most people think they know the Dutch. Tall cyclists in a country that sits below the ocean. But what if I told you their real story starts with the violent fall of the Roman Empire? What if the same people who made wooden shoes were actually among the first Europeans to step onto Australian soil? The truth about the Dutch is stranger and more brutal than any history class ever revealed. Before this is over, everything you think you know will change. We're going back thousands of years to uncover the real origin of the Dutch people. From ancient warriors carving territories out of flooded wastelands, to merchant explorers who dominated half the known world, to genetic codes linking them to migrations older than written history. This isn't about windmills and tulips. This is about survival, conquest, and the bloodlines that built one of history's most powerful cultures. The story starts with understanding their homeland. The Netherlands literally means lowlands. And that's not just a clever name. 1/3 of the entire country sits below sea level. Stop and think about that. Without constant human intervention, without an endless network of dikes, dams, and pumping stations, massive sections of the Netherlands would vanish beneath the North Sea. This isn't some interesting geographic detail. This is an existential threat that shaped Dutch culture for over 1,000 years. When the ocean tries to reclaim your home every single day, it creates a specific kind of person. Methodical, engineering-obsessed, fixated on precision and control. The Dutch didn't just survive the water, they conquered it. They transformed their greatest weakness into their greatest weapon. The same hydraulic engineering keeping their country dry gave them the technology to become naval superpowers. But here's what most people miss. This relationship with water goes back thousands of years. The earliest settlers in this region were already building artificial dwelling mounds to stay above floodwaters, which raises an obvious question. Who were these people who looked at a flooded swamp and called it home? The answer takes us back over 2,000 years, long before the Netherlands existed as a concept. Before nation-states, before flags and borders, there were tribes, Germanic tribes. Peoples the Romans called Germana were already reshaping Northern Europe before Rome even conquered Gaul. These weren't one unified group, they were dozens of distinct tribes with separate customs, dialects, and territories. But they shared something critical: language roots, cultural practices, and fierce resistance to Roman expansion. The ancestors of modern Dutch people were predominantly Frankish tribes, along with Saxons, Frisians, and Batavians. These groups occupied the Rhine River Delta region, the exact location of today's Netherlands, for centuries. When Rome tried pushing northward, they hit a wall. Germanic tribes didn't follow Roman rules. The Battle of the Teutoburg Forest in 9 AD saw Germanic warriors obliterate 3 entire Roman legions. It remains one of Rome's worst military disasters ever. The Romans learned their lesson fast. They established the Rhine River as their northern frontier and essentially said, "We're done here. You keep your swamps." But then history takes a dramatic turn. Fast forward to the 4th and 5th centuries. The Western Roman Empire is collapsing, and you won't believe what those same Germanic tribes did next. Those Germanic tribes didn't just defend their territory. They swept across the entire crumbling Roman Empire. They established kingdoms in Italy, Gaul, Britain, Iberia, even North Africa. The Franks, direct ancestors of the Dutch, created one of the most powerful kingdoms in post-Roman Europe. Under Charlemagne, the Frankish Empire dominated the entire continent. This is the blood flowing through Dutch veins, not passive farmers, warriors and empire builders. And if you want proof of these ancient connections, just listen to the language. Dutch is a Germanic language, specifically the 3rd most widely spoken Germanic language after English and German. When you hear it, you can literally hear the family resemblance. Water in English, Wasser in German, water in Dutch, school in English, Schule in German, school in Dutch, garden in English, Garten in German, Tuin in Dutch. These aren't coincidences, they're linguistic fossils. Each word is evidence of a shared ancestor language called Proto-Germanic, spoken thousands of years ago by those ancient tribes. But the Netherlands isn't the only place Dutch is spoken. In Belgium, they speak Flemish, essentially a Dutch dialect. In South Africa, they speak Afrikaans, which evolved from Dutch brought by colonizers in the 1600s. This language spread reveals something crucial about what happened next. When people think of colonial empires, they think Britain, Spain, France. They forget the Dutch entirely. But here's what actually happened. At its height, the Dutch Empire was one of the most powerful on earth. The Dutch East India Company was the most valuable corporation in human history, worth over $7 trillion in today's money. The Dutch controlled Indonesia for over 300 years. They colonized parts of Brazil, the Caribbean, India, Sri Lanka, Taiwan, and South Africa. They established New Amsterdam, which you know today as New York City. And here's the fact that shocks most people. The Dutch were the first Europeans to reach Australia and New Zealand, not the British. Abel Tasman, a Dutch explorer, mapped substantial portions of Australia's coast in 1642. He was the first European to reach Tasmania and New Zealand. The British didn't arrive until over a century later, but they got the credit in most history books. Why don't we discuss this more? Because colonial history is uncomfortable. But this is part of Dutch origins too. Not the proud part, but the real part. These weren't innocent merchants. They were empire builders who used naval technology, financial innovation, and military force to control global trade routes. The wealth flowing back to the Netherlands during the Golden Age was built on colonization, slavery, and exploitation. Understanding Dutch origins means confronting this contradiction. But what if we could look even deeper than historical records? Modern genetics reveals something extraordinary. Scientists have now mapped the Dutch genetic landscape with precision impossible just a decade ago. A landmark study analyzed the Y chromosomes of 285 Dutch men across the entire country. The results are fascinating. Despite its tiny size, the Netherlands has significant genetic geographic substructure. Here's what the DNA actually shows. The Dutch Y chromosome is dominated by two major haplogroups, I and R. Haplogroup I accounts for 28% of Dutchmen, while haplogroup R reaches 62%. But within these broad categories lies incredible detail. The most common subgroups are R1, BL48, 15% of Dutchmen, R1BM 405, 14%, and R1BS 116, 9%. These aren't random letters and numbers. They're genetic signatures tracing paternal lineages back thousands of years. What's remarkable is these haplogroups show clear geographic patterns across the Netherlands. Some run north-south, others east-west, creating a complex genetic map reflecting centuries of local settlement patterns. But scientists discovered something completely unexpected when they examined mitochondrial DNA passed down through mothers. The mtDNA shows virtually no geographic substructure across the Netherlands. This stark contrast between paternal and maternal lineages reveals something profound about Dutch society, and what it means will surprise you. That genetic difference tells an incredible story. Dutch society was predominantly patrilocal for over 1500 years. Men stayed in their local communities, generation after generation, while women moved between communities. This created stable local male lineages that persisted for centuries, reinforced by limited male mobility. Ancient DNA studies confirm this continuity. Analysis of medieval Dutch populations shows remarkable stability over 1500 years. The paternal lineages remained largely continuous from the early Middle Ages to the present day. While other parts of Europe experienced massive population upheavals after Rome's fall, the Low Countries maintained genetic continuity. So what does this mean for Dutch origins? It means when you meet a Dutch man, there's a real chance his Y chromosome connects him directly to ancestors who lived in the same region over 1,000 years ago. The genetic evidence supports the historical record perfectly. These were Germanic tribes who settled, stayed, and built communities that lasted. But there's an even older connection hidden in the DNA. The R1b haplogroups dominating the Dutch gene pool likely originated with Bronze Age steppe migrations around 5,000 years ago. When nomadic herders swept into Europe with their horses and wagons, they left a permanent mark on what would become the Netherlands. Your average Dutch person today doesn't just carry echoes of this ancient migration. They carry specific, identifiable genetic markers scientists can trace directly back to the Pontic-Caspian steppe. And here's what makes this revolutionary. Genetic studies are revealing that the traditional view of Dutch settlement patterns might be completely wrong. While conventional wisdom says the Netherlands was settled from south to north, some genetic analyses show the exact opposite pattern, suggesting settlement from the north downward. The intersection of genetics, archaeology, and historical linguistics isn't just confirming what we thought we knew, it's actively rewriting the story. And this brings up something unexpected. If someone asked you what Malaysia, Indonesia, the Philippines, Hawaii, New Zealand, and Madagascar have in common, you'd probably struggle for an answer. Here's the connection. They're all linked through Austronesian peoples who share a common ancestral homeland. the island of Taiwan. Around 5,000 years ago, people from Taiwan began one of the most remarkable maritime expansions in human history. They developed outrigger canoes and navigational techniques, allowing them to settle the Pacific and Indian Oceans. Today, from Easter Island to Madagascar, you can trace this expansion through genetics, language, and culture. Why does this matter for understanding the Dutch? Because it demonstrates how deeply interconnected human origins truly are, how peoples can spread across unimaginable distances and still maintain cultural and genetic connections, how populations survive, maintain their identities, and preserve their stories. The Dutch story isn't unique. They just happen to have a particularly dramatic version. So here's where everything comes together. What are the true origins of the Dutch people? They're descendants of Germanic tribes who settled a harsh waterlogged frontier and turned it into home. They're inheritors of Frankish warriors who helped topple Rome and build medieval kingdoms. They carry genetic echoes of steppe nomads from 5,000 years ago. They are the product of a unique environment that demanded innovation or extinction. They became engineers, merchants, and naval powers because their survival depended on it. They built a global empire that rivaled Britain's, discovered lands others got credit for, and created economic systems still shaping global trade today. All of this is true simultaneously. The Dutch aren't just tall people on bikes. They're not just wooden shoes and windmills. They're a complex combination of ancient migrations, environmental adaptation, cultural evolution, and historical choices, both brilliant and brutal. Understanding their origins means holding all of these truths at once. And here's what should really stick with you. Every single culture on Earth has a story this complex. Layers upon layers of migration, conquest, adaptation, and change. The Dutch story just happens to be well documented and relatively recent. But whether we're talking about Austronesian peoples who crossed impossible oceans or Germanic tribes who reshaped Europe, the pattern is always the same. Human origins are never simple. They're never pure. They're always a tangled web of movement, mixing, and transformation. The people who tell you otherwise, who claim simple, clean origin stories, are either lying or ignorant. The truth is messy. The truth is complicated. And the truth is so much more interesting than the myths. Think about what surprised you most about the true origins of the Dutch people. Was it their ancient Germanic warrior ancestors? The fact they discovered Australia first? The genetic connections to steppe nomads from 5,000 years ago? Or maybe the sheer scope of their forgotten empire? Because history isn't what they taught you in school. It's stranger, more interconnected, and more brutal than anyone wants to admit. The Dutch are proof that every origin story hides layers most people never see.